Now, B, these days, is really into a conspiracy theory. B thinks that people in power are encouraging people to travel a lot abroad because they want people to get on airplanes so that the airplanes can take them to high altitude. Because if they are up high in high altitude, let's say there's some kind of technology from aliens that enable them to suck out, let's say, spiritual energy out of people little by little. A and B were planned to go traveling abroad. But because B is now suddenly into this conspiracy theory, B wants to cancel everything. So now A is a little bit frustrated, and therefore today's conversation will start with A's question. You really believe that kind of story? So, of course, let's start with, yes, omitting you. Of course, I'm talking to you. Now, we have the adverb really. We have the verb believe. Now, whenever you're placing that kind of in front of some kind of a noun, like when you say, that kind of person, that kind of car, that kind of chair, whatever that noun may be. Whenever you're placing that kind of, now do not try to separate it from the noun. Meaning, if the noun is the object within the given sentence, then that kind of follows the noun into the same grammatical position, part of speech, the object. So if the noun is the object, that kind of will stay with the noun and also be a part of the object. When you're placing that kind of in front of some kind of a noun, you have enlarged two versions you can use. 그런 and 저런. So, usually, whenever we have some kind of a grammatical component that has that included, there's usually two versions, right? A version that starts with a G and a version that starts with a J. Okay, so the same with that kind of. Now, in this case, which one would you use? The answer is 그런. I should use 그런 within this given context and situation instead of 저런. Now, why is that? Because 그런 will be used in two cases. Number one, when whatever that kind of is modifying, in this case story, is closer to the listener than it is to the speaker. So the physical location of it has to be closer to the listener than it is to the speaker. Or it can also be used when whatever that kind of is modifying is not within sight at all. In this case, I would use version number one because, yes, this story is not something that we can see with our naked eyes. It's not something that has a physical form that we can see. So I'm going to look at it as something that is not within sight, and therefore I will use 그런 instead of 저런. Because when is 저런 used? 저런 is used when whatever that kind of is modifying is physically located roughly equally away from the speaker and the listener. But once again, in this case, it doesn't take a physical form right now, so I can't say it's closer to the listener or it's closer to the speaker. Yes, it's not even there for us to see. So it's not within sight, therefore I will use 그런 as that kind of. So we have 그런. And then, yes, let's place story. And yes, there are a lot of versions of story. However, 얘기 would be the most colloquial version, so the safest version to use. Now, you could be aware of a version that looks like this. 이야기, 이야기, 이야기. It's usually too poetic to be actually used in a real-life conversation. So therefore, we have 그런 얘기, that kind of story. Now, we have an object. Yes, a big, bulky, long object, but still an object. Now, am I going to give this object an object particle just because it is an object? Of course not. Exactly. If I were to give a subject or object particle, I have to have a very specific reason. And right now, I want to give the object an object particle for reason number 2, in order to imbue the nuance of frustration or surprise into this word, and by extension the full sentence, the whole sentence. Do not try to translate the object particle. It's not something that will be translated into a word one-to-one. It's a nuance. So I'm going to have this sentence automatically carry the nuance of frustration. 그런 얘기를. And then, yes, let's move on to really. The adverb really. 진짜. Now there are a lot of versions of really as well, but the other versions can be usually poetic or always poetic, or a version that has a very, very specific tailored nuance automatically attached to them. So therefore, they are versions that you can only use in those tailored situations. So for the most part, when you're just having a normal, regular, real-life conversation, 진짜, really, would be the safest version to use. And then, yes, let's place the display form of the verb believe, 믿다. But of course, I don't want its display form. I don't want the ta ending. I want the ending that indicates actual form, present tense. In other words, the yo ending. And the yo ending belongs to inflection route number 1, right? So let's go to inflection route number 1. Because we're using an ending that belongs to inflection route number 1, we have to follow the rules of inflection route number 1. Inflection route number 1 says, my route, my rules. Okay, fair enough. So, well, we have a display form that ends with the D consonant once ta is removed. Now in this case, for the most part, you will apply a 3-step formula. However, I am placing heavy emphasis on for the most part, which means that there are exceptions. Now, in large, 4 exceptions. There are more, but you're pretty much safe with 4. Now, those 4 exceptions, yes, they also have display forms that end with the D consonant once ta is removed, but they do not follow this conventional 3-step formula. They follow their own 4-step formula. However, 믿다 is not one of those 4 exceptions. Therefore, yes, I am going to apply the 3-step formula. So remove ta. Let's do that then. And then place a or all as the irregular middle section. And then, yes, now we can 드디어 attach the ending. So 이제, what do we have? Now what do we have? 믿어요. 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 Exactly. Now we have the actual form, present tense of the verb believe, which is believe. 그런 얘기를 진짜 믿어요? 그런 얘기를 진짜 믿어요? 그런 얘기를 진짜 믿어요?